I'm honored to be here. Really excited to be this bunch of yours. And business to me is an unbelievable vehicle for change. There's a quote that always stuck with me from Gary Hirshberg. For those who don't know Gary Hirshberg, he's the founder of Stonyfield Farms, a yogurt company out of New Hampshire. They're now at about maybe 400 million a year, so it's a decent sized business. And his quote in his book was, "Business is the force that got us into this mess, and it's the only force that can get us out of it." Now, that's not to say that nothing else is important, but I do believe business is very agile, it has resources, it can change directions very quickly, and it can promote. And I think there's no shame in promoting when you're in business, because if you don't, you may not be around for very long. Having said that, I will set a few rules for today. This is going to be very dynamic. I want this to be a conversation, an organic conversation, both from you guys and from us here. And when you will ask a question, please be brief. And if I raise my hand, you've got 10 seconds to get to your point. And I want this, because we're going to be brief here. We want everybody to talk and to get many questions. So when you get up to ask a question, please be brief. There you go. Okay, introductions. I'll be quick because these guys will have 3 minutes to introduce themselves. And I know a lot about Ananda, but not so much about the others, so to be fair, I'll do a quick intro of everybody. Gregory Landua, founder and CEO of Terra International. So you help national brands build capacity and leadership. Ananda Fitzsimmons, from Inocucor, microbial-based products in agriculture. Bernard-Perron, from the Greene organization, growing organic cannabis. And I will say it right, I promise. Greene, from Propagate Ventures, building agroforestry landscapes. So I will see who's first. You're first. You tell me when you want to play.
I'm ready.
There you go.
How's it going? Good afternoon, bonjour. Je m'appelle Harrison Greene. Je suis très heureux d'être ici aujourd'hui. Thanks for having us. I'm here with my co-founders and business partners, Jeremy Kaufman and Ethan Steinberg, and together we form Propagate Ventures. So what we do is agroforestry. We're on a mission to scale agroforestry into a cornerstone of agriculture, do it profitably, and sequester a metric shit ton of carbon in the process. So what is agroforestry? We phrase it as the incorporation of useful trees onto farms that work in tandem with the existing operations on that farm. So 3 examples of that are orchard bands. We classify traditional tree crop production within agroforestry, so breaking up the corn, soy monoculture with tree crops. Secondarily, alley cropping consists of growing annual crops in between rows of trees. And lastly, silvopasture consists of incorporating trees onto grazing land or incorporating livestock grazing animals into woodlands. We fall into the former category. I'd like to point out that our stock intensity in the silvopasture diagram is very high. I had Jeremy Kaufman design the slides that way. So our 3 sample programs are called Subsoil, Taproot, and Evergreen. Our Subsoil program is an agroforestry audit, which means we work through the landowner, land manager, farmer's desires, and what their land can produce, and figure out what type of agroforestry system is going to be most viable and most profitable. Moving into Taproot, our plant-to-plant establishment program, that consists of selling the trees and optionally the planting services to the landowner. And then lastly, our Evergreen Profit Share Partnership consists of us funding the installation of the trees, but then having a profit share with the farmer or landowner or land manager in that system. So over the years, when those tree crops start to produce value, be it from timber, nuts, or fruits, then we'll share those profits with the landowner. So a lot of people like to talk about their revenues in business and in farming, but we'd like to talk about our costs and our net. What do these systems cost to install? When did they start yielding? What are the operational expenditures? Those are your variable costs, your year-to-year costs, your capital expenditures. People look at $50,000 for installing widely spaced apple trees on 27 acres in Gawk and say, how am I going to get over that? So cost modeling is really the core of our operation. So an apple orchard ban, these are per 100 tree metrics. Hours, 320 hours per year, because apples are very management intensive. Moving into chestnuts, the yields, the dollar yields, the revenues may be lower, but it requires less operational expenditure in terms of labor. So say a black locust windbreak, 100 trees, that might be 400 feet long of windbreak. That's going to require fewer hours per year. Say pruning and mowing in between the trees. But in years 15 and 20, you'll have lump sum cash flows. And if you want to learn more about us, just if you want to take a photo of the slide or ask for a business card afterwards, feel free to get in contact. Our ventures site is propagateventures.com. It has all of our programs on it. Our news site is propagate.org, and we'd like to thank the Living Soil Symposium and Regeneration Canada for having us.
If you heard, David?
Hi, I'm David Bernard-Perron. I'm a plant scientist by formation. I'm also a microbiologist in British Columbia. I moved there after I finished grad school in McGill in plant science. And the West Coast being what it is, I'm now growing medical cannabis. It's been quite an interesting journey, a lot of learning, navigating your way through a lot of misinformation, pseudoscience, and bringing this horticultural discipline to the cannabis industry has been what I've been personally working on over the last few years. Now I just moved back here to the east. We're building a big complex of a greenhouse in Valleyfield with the Greene Organic Dutchman. We're going to be the world's biggest organic cannabis producer starting in 2019. We're doing everything in living soil. We're doing this at scale with a lot of automation. We're not using any pesticide. Cannabis has been an incredible plant to work with because of the prohibition, there was so much to be done with this plant. But also it's a plant that responds so well to be grown under organic system because you get an improvement in quality, improvement in your yield, and you're testing the plant for potency and all the yield per square foot. And we have those super nice results of peak. It's a plant that helped a lot of people too. A plant that a lot of people have fun with as well. That's probably coming online in July next year. That's another interesting thing. But it's also been an amazing economical driver for research and development in organic production systems. So the margins are very high. It allows us to play with a lot of different amendments, growing trials, and we've been able to develop very interesting systems producing cannabis with dried. So Inocucor works great with cannabis. It's been awesome to work with that product. And yes, so this is what we've been doing.
Hi everybody, I'm Gregory, Landua with Terra International. And we work with brands all around the world to help them explore the potential of their supply in the transition towards regenerative agriculture. So we strongly believe, and it is our audacious goal, that we can completely reverse climate change in the next 20 years through agriculture. It's been spoken about throughout the conference here, and I think it's important to understand the role of business. Larry was talking about that a little bit. In order to achieve landscape scale regeneration of agroecosystems, we need to have the entire value-adding stream from soil all the way to the end customer and back again, participating in a cooperative way to make that happen. So we really strongly believe in the potential of business to be one of the primary drivers of that. And I mean, I think it's really important to engage in this entire conversation in a way that is, in and of itself, regenerative. So what I mean is, in order to achieve this kind of planetary regeneration that we're talking about, we can't, and Dee Dee spoke about this yesterday, I was in the back jumping up and down when she was talking about this. Businesses cannot, and neither can you, rely on experts to tell you what to do. And I'm hoping that this panel and this conversation is invigorating an exploration of each of you and how you are A, investors, and how your investments are aligned with your values, and B, entrepreneurs yourself, and how you're creating ventures, co-creating, and collaborating with people in order to, the definition that was given by Cameron of entrepreneurship, of taking something from a place of high value to a place of low value. How are we reinvesting the financial capital that it represents the liquidation of the living systems of planet Earth back into the living systems of planet Earth? And what is the role of business in that? So I think that's going to be the context and texture of this conversation, and I'm very excited to be here. Anybody have an idea what this is? There's coffee, there's cardamom, there's cacao, there's boroko, which is an amazing nutraceutical, and lots of carbon. Yes. And this is on a research farm, a regenerative agroforestry research farm, part of a cacao growers co-op that we work with in Ecuador, where many leading brands of chocolate makers are buying their cacao from, and is the kind of example of sort of a participatory cooperative process between competitors engaging in the exploration of what regenerative agriculture looks like in their systems of supply.
Okay, so Inocucor makes sustainable microbial-based products for agriculture. Our products are organic, but our target market is not only small organic farms. We hope to break into conventional agriculture and sell our products on larger scale production farms. Right now, we have 2,000 square feet of facility in Montreal where we have offices and ferment our products, and we're in the process of scaling up and building another facility in the US, in Denver. So our core technology is based on mixed microbial communities, and these are biostimulants, also products for biofertility and biocontrol. So biostimulants is something that more and more people are starting to hear about, but a lot of people aren't actually sure what they do because they don't really fit into a lot of the regulatory categories that we presently have for agricultural products. So a biostimulant is not a fertilizer, and it's not a biocontrol product. It's somewhere in between. It helps plants grow, it stimulates the soil biology. It's sort of like a probiotic. It helps with nutrient assimilation, and it helps resist disease. So it's one of those kind of new products that we're trying to raise awareness of the value and benefit of these products. Biofertility are products that help plants take in micro and macronutrients, and biocontrol products are products that target specific diseases. There's not that many of the larger ag companies that make microbial products that have more than one or two species in them. Usually they're based on one specific microbe that targets one specific thing. So ours has a whole consortia, and all the products that we have in the pipeline are going to be based on consortia. The other thing that's a little bit unique about our product is the actives are not necessarily the live microbes. We're not necessarily putting a live microbe into the environment to do the job. The microbes are like the production factory. They produce the biochemistry inside the fermentation tank, and what we deliver is the biochemistry of biostimulant molecules that are stimulating the plant and the soil ecology. Go ahead. So the two products that we have commercialized that are right on the market now are Synagro, which has live microorganisms, but these are both biostimulants. Synagro has the live microorganisms in them, and it's being sold mainly for high-value fruits and vegetables. And Synagro Free is a cell-free formulation. We've taken out the live microbes and concentrated metabolites in it so that it can be tank mixed into, can be sold to conventional farmers and tank mixed with things that might actually kill it in the tank, but it will actually help. And so what we're really aiming to do is to sort of move the conversation forward and break into mainstream conventional farms, just to introduce the idea of microbial-based products to reduce the amount of chemicals that are being used, and to introduce the idea of the soil microbiome and the importance of biostimulation. You don't have to have the nutrients in the bottle. You can build the soil ecology.
Thank you, guys. So I'll have one question for each one of them, very specific to, we had lunch together, so we talked about certain things, and then I'll pass it on to the audience. So please prepare your questions. I'll start with Harry. You talked about regeneration agriculture as sometimes being an expensive transition, or that there's a lot of capital expenses that are related to it. How do you guys manage that challenge?
Yeah. So the upfront costs for installing an agroforestry system are high, and the trees don't cash flow for up to over a decade. So how do we make tree systems liquid, which means easily traded, easily converted into other assets? And our Evergreen program, by paying for the installation of the trees on the land, uses investment capital to provide a zero-cost option to farms to add trees to their land. So the farms get all the benefit of the trees without having to pay for them. So our goal is to create the asset class that is agroforestry, much in that solar panel finance has no trouble in finding capital to install solar panels and sell the electricity that they produce along the way. We're doing the exact same thing with agroforestry.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So just to tack on to that, I think one of the things that we've noticed is that so capital expense upfront to transition a system. So just a couple notes on that. One, why is it expensive to transition to regenerative agriculture? Because the existing infrastructure has been built by subsidies and externalization of many different costs, and it exists. So there's like a legacy infrastructure here that is moving towards, it's sort of firmly rooted in the conventional ag extractive economy. So in order to make a transition successful, one of the things that we found, sort of pointing back to the slide that I was sharing of that beautiful farm, you actually need to cooperate with a variety of different investor classes, businesses, and stakeholders in order to de-risk that initial capital investment. So what that means in our work, working with brands, is that oftentimes we're creating these consortiums or guilds of brands who are cooperating in order to make those initial investments to transition towards regenerative agriculture. And that's the interesting thing is business has a long precedent of doing that. So it's not even sort of speaking a different language to a person who's in business to talk about how to de-risk that kind of scenario. But it's incredibly important, I think, for us to be thinking about how to cooperate to build those financial bridges for people. I think Propagate's doing a great job with that.
And when we work with brands, we create certainty and demand for farmers, and when farmers collaborate as a cooperative, then they create certainty in supply for the brand. So, as an example, black locust is highly rot resistant. It's a substitute for pressure-treated wood. And selling 10 trees is much more difficult than collaborating with hundreds of acres of farmers that on whose land there would exist hundreds of different trees that can collectively form security and supply.
So if I might, recently I was having a conversation with a group of investors about a fairly large capital expenditure project, and as a group, we were having trouble understanding the magnitude, sort of the order of magnitude of the investment we were talking about. And one of the investors said, well, really what I want to understand is, are we talking about, this investment, are we building a Fiat, like a little tiny car, or are we talking about building a semi-truck? And I think one of the really important things for all of us to recognize is most of the transition towards regenerative agriculture that we're talking about, people aren't even talking about building the Fiat. They're talking about a wheel and an axle, or the lights. And what we really have to do is we have to understand that there's a scale. In order to actually have something on the road and moving, to use this mechanical metaphor, which maybe isn't the best, but it works for all of us, right? In order to actually get something that's on the ground moving, so there's a living example of regenerative agriculture in an entire economic stream from source to sink and back to source, we have to achieve the full expression of that. It has to, at the very minimum, be a Fiat driving. In this case, we were trying to design a Land Cruiser. But the point is that scale, and interestingly enough, what we found is the scale for that to be a full expression. We were talking about several barrels of essential oils, the ability to feed 3 or 4 restaurants with pastured pork and tilapia, and cacao for 1 or 2, this is in the tropics, and cacao for 1 or 2 small chocolate companies. That's what it took to have a full package that's actually up and running. But when we look at that, it's sort of like, so that's one of the things I'd like to bring to the conversation is just the scale and the order of magnitude to achieve something that's complete and functional and not be just working piecemeal in a fragmented way.
You guys have something to add? Anything on that?
Sounds pretty cool.
Going on scale, how do we scale up regenerative agriculture? David, how do you think about that with organic cannabis, etc.? At lunch we talked about that. Can you expand a bit on how to scale?
Yeah, well, our goal, we're building 6 hectares of greenhouse in Battlefield right now. We're going to be fully organic and very a living soil system. So we've seen the system working. Previous licensed producer I was working for, which was Worcester Medical Marijuana, they were the first, and as of now still the only certified organic cannabis licensed producer in Canada. We're going to go organic as well with the Green Organic Dutchman. But to scale, so we know that the system works, and like those guys touched on the initial investment to build the system, because nobody has built them before, are huge. The cost per square feet for those greenhouses are above $100 per square feet, so it's very expensive. But because we're in this very unique cannabis bubble right now, we're able to get investment, and the margins are huge, and we're using those margins to build this Fiat. So we're implementing a lot of automation. We have mobile bench that will bring the plants to worker station to reduce our labor costs, and a lot of automation, irrigation. We're going to be talking about designing some robots that will go and apply organic fertilizers and fertilizer plants and all that. So by making the best of this opportunity that the market's providing us with this green rush that cannabis production is right now, we're able to try new things, and if everything goes well, we're going to have this first Fiat, and next time we're going to maybe go for the Land Cruiser, or
does like a self-driving Tesla.
Yeah, that'd be sweet. That'd be very sweet. But the cost will be reduced, or the second greenhouse will have to be reduced, because we already see and plans for margin compression in the industry that will come as more and more producers come online. We're differentiating ourselves as a brand because we're going to be more sustainable. We're aiming to be a zero carbon emission greenhouse. We're going to be organic too. We're investing in community agriculture, local garden, and stuff like that. So we're building our brand that way for when this price compression, making this, and I really like what we discussed at the lunch day of how you can become part of this community and community as an ecosystem, make yourself an essential part, a beneficial part of your community and your economy, and stay there when we'll have to deal with those tougher changes. You have to deal with those challenges that you're part of the solution. That's what we're trying to put ourselves for scaling up. So yeah, it's expensive right now, but we're gonna develop those. We have the opportunity to develop those models right now using cannabis as a driver, and hopefully we'll be able to create a ripple effect in the rest of the horticultural, agricultural industry and use those models and those lessons that we've been able to learn in this specific business and grow tomatoes, pepper, food, or anything, using the lesson we've learned in cannabis.
Good. Ananda, I'm gonna roll on the scale. We talked a lot about scale. We talked about organic versus and conventional farming, and it's obvious that conventional has to be included in the conversation, and that we have to adapt our language so that everybody understands what we all need to do. How do you at Inocucor work on having that language that's understood from conventional as well as organic?
Well, as I mentioned in the introduction, right from the get-go, our intention was to get into mainstream agriculture and push the needle in that regard. So that's been our intention from the beginning, and we've always been very careful in terms of how we present ourselves. We do talk about soil health, and we do talk about reducing the amendments, but we're always very, very careful not to be judgmental, because I think if you want to change somebody, you don't go into the conversation judging how they do things or telling them that they have to change right away. And you try to move that conversation along. So, and we don't go in there talking about environmental benefits. We go in there talking about the benefits that they will gain from doing this. So we talk about what's going to be the return on investment if they get the kind of yield increases. You know, how is using this kind of technology going to solve problems that they have? So we're very, very careful about the conversation. There's a huge amount of polarization between the organic and the conventional. There's a lot of conventional farmers that feel incredibly judged by the organic movement and, you know, just want to stay way away from it. It's almost like a dirty word. But the thing that really, that I found is really moving the thing along is that consumer demand for foods that don't have pesticides in them, for organic foods. That is the reason that there's large farms. There's, you know, farms that have 20,000 plus acres of land producing food, and they're going to have 5% of their production organic because consumers are demanding it, because they can get more money for a case of broccoli if it's organic and if it's conventional. So the money thing is a very, very important thing, and I think it's very important for all of us to just be aware if we want to make that kind of change. We can't go out speaking to the people that we want to change by judging them or telling them that the place where they're at right now is not enough, it's not far enough. You know, it's got to be a much more positive kind of conversation, and I think that's something that we really need to be mindful of. I was very much in agreement with Tim LaSalle on Friday night. He said, We got to take the word organic out of it. It's not only about organic. I mean, we can talk about this movement of, you know, sequestering the carbon in the ground, but at the end of the day, we also have to talk about better food, and we have to talk about the benefit for people's lives, because all farmers, whether they're conventional or organic, work very hard. They love what they're doing. They love the land. They're basically good people working out of the information that they have. And I just think it's really important to bring them into the conversation.
I have one more question for Gregory, and then it's up to you guys. We talked about collaboration, the ecosystem, different conversations with investors, suppliers, etc., which seems to be at the center of your work. How do you approach? How do you think about collaboration in this regenerative business, agriculture, etc.?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there's a fundamental paradigm shift that's necessary, which is from this sort of pseudo-Darwinian survival of the fittest. Darwin never even talked about that, by the way. I don't know if anybody realized that. To understanding ecosystems at a more fundamental level, and understanding that a species' success is related directly to how integral they are to the health of the ecosystem. So your ability to cooperatively exchange nutrients in an ecosystem and be part of a whole is what is most evolutionary adaptive and what drives evolution in a biological sense. Okay, so that's science, and it's also business. So businesses that are not completely integral to the health of the ecosystems and social systems of which they are a part will go extinct. And as Ronnie was talking about earlier, we can all feel free to help make them go extinct. And as business leaders, it is our job to figure out how to grow the capacity and health of all of the stakeholders we're interacting with. That is the fundamental job of a regenerative business. And that includes the soil health, and that includes the customer's health. That includes farmers who are real people who may be using pesticides. How do you connect with them as human beings and help grow them in a healthy way and their farms in a healthy way? So that's a beautiful example, you know, designing products, designing conversations, designing education to real people in real context does not, you know, we can't afford to kind of other one another. We have to look at how to have a deep personal connection and express that deep personal connection and relationship through our business venture. And that's how cooperation and an entire ecosystem of businesses that are cooperating with one another in order to do the biggest, most beautiful work in the world, which is regenerate our biosphere and one another. That's how that's going to work. It's not going to work with a meta master plan that somebody figures out. It's not going to work by shaming people who aren't in. It's going to work by being creative and excited and in deep inquiry through business and other avenues. But in this context, you know, business is an enormously agile and powerful way to create those kinds of connections with one another.
Cool. I feel like it's worth opening a question to the three of you, because you're all in a different type of business, meaning you're really there to solve a problem and offer a solution. So how would you relate to that question of collaboration? How do you do it differently, where you're really trying to be a service to your ecosystem, not just extracting profit out of your business?
Yeah, I'd like to highlight being inclusive with all types of farmers when we go out and work with them. I've lived in Vermont, in Burlington, Vermont, for the past 2 years, and I can eat only local organic food and get all of my nutrients and calories from that food. And that's not true in the rest of the United States and Canada. I did some work with Ben & Jerry's on their dairy supply chain for a little bit. And the conventional farmers are out there working incredibly hard, not getting paid enough for what they produce. And being inclusive towards them. I mean, when they're spreading their manure along Lake Champlain, they get flip the bird from people that are on the lake, and being inclusive to them in terms of whether it's planting trees on their land, helping them transition to more regenerative practices such as cover cropping. It's all incredibly necessary. I've shown photos of alley cropping systems with a combine driving right next to a row of trees, to organic farmers who've been not interested at all, to conventional farmers who say, I would do that, to organic farmers to say, when can I sign up, and conventional farmers to say, I'm not going to drive next to a damn hobble tree. So inclusivity is what I'd like to highlight.
We're going to be involved in our community by hiring a lot of local people and educating them, organic growing, also we're building an education or a learning center on our property that we want to team up with some universities. We're in discussion with Megan University to give them a chance to come and use our greenhouses, teach about organic agriculture, have students for internship, and or have an organization center where people can come and learn about organic agriculture. Also, what cannabis is a lot of education for us to do because cannabis legalization is coming up. It's a new plant. A lot of people are thinking about the stoner culture right away when you think about cannabis. It's going way beyond this. So we're teaming up with medical research people to see how it can be used. That plant, how can we learn more about how the plant can be used to help people and why it works and all that. There's a lot of anecdotal evidence right now. It works great for stuff. So learning about that and being part of this whole change, this big educational movement for us, this is how we're planning to do that.
Actually, it's been a very fascinating process for me to be involved in this business because there's a huge ecosystem that's involved in creating change, and the different people that we're talking to on all the different levels. There's the financial community, because in order to go into mainstream agriculture, that is a very expensive proposition. And there's the capital, venture capital companies that fund things like that. So you're talking to high-level finance people, and that's one conversation. And it's interesting, by the way, when we were talking about fundraising and CapEx, because I don't know how many people know this, but in the financial community, there is actually a big buzz about microbial technologies. They all think it's the next big thing, and investors are kind of falling over themselves to figure out which technology to invest in. There's a bit of a gap between that level, where there's all these technologies that are receiving huge amounts of funds actually right now, and then the end user who's going, what? Microbial technologies, biostimulants? So there's that piece. There's the financial community, as I said. There's the universities. You're not going to change anybody's behavior unless you have credible third-party evidence behind you, which is also very expensive to do the kind of studies, to get the kind of data that you need to make yourself credible. So there's the conversations with the academics and the third-party researchers. There's the whole marketing system, and then there's the end users on the ground. So there's an incredible network. There's the agronomists and the crop advisors, which play a huge role. So there's all of these people doing different things. It's a big ecosystem that's feeding into the general public awareness, and all the people that are involved in food production, all the different levels that are playing all those roles, are in a way educating each other. And you know, I can't remember who it was, but somebody said, you know, you just don't know where your allies are going to come from, because you run into people in all of those areas, from you know, high-level venture capital people who have, you know, a lot of awareness about sustainability and technology and are working for change. You know, to the people that are doing the research, to the people that are part of the supply chain. to all the different farmers and farming systems that there are, from really high-tech things to gigantic farms to small organic farms. It's an incredible ecosystem, and your allies are all over the place, and ignorance is there too. So it's an evolving conversation in a very complex ecosystem.
I encourage you guys to ask the questions after, because there's many we didn't even get to ask the questions. So let's thank the panel and carry the conversation.